This story of Master Hunter Bunna became very widely known, both in that district and in other places far distant from it. Many who heard it were afraid. They no longer dared to trample carelessly around that cave as they had before. The cave and its surroundings then became a quiet and lonely place, well suited to the practice of meditation and the ascetic mode of living of all Thudanga-kammartana bhikkhus. The villagers in that district considered it to be a sacred place, so they did not dare to do as they pleased there like they used to. Pure moral virtues. It was then that Ajaan Khao, who was taking his disciples out wandering in the way of Thudanga-kammartana, decided to stop and stay at Tumklong Pen Cave to develop the practice of Dhamma. He saw that it was a convenient and peaceful place, well suited to the needs of the body, the mind, and the practice of Samarna Dhamma. It also had a beneficial influence on the sharpness and subtlety of his meditation. So he decided to stay at Wat Tumklong Pen continually until the end of his life. He spent the rest of his life looking after the bhikkhus and novices at Wat Tumklong Pen, teaching all of them steadily without ever giving up. The Dhamma which he liked to teach them started off with constant training in the 4 moral purities, Chatupari Sila, Indriya Sangvara Sila. This means the restraint of and watchfulness over the 6 Indriya, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, not letting them give rise to pleasure or displeasure which arouses love and hate, loathing, anger, greed, and craving for those things which contact the senses without ever reaching satisfaction and sufficiency. The 6 internal sense fields, ayatana, which are the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, together with the 6 external sense fields, which are form, sound, smell, taste, things which make contact with the body, and mental objects that come from things which make contact with the mind, form pairs in which the internal and external sense fields act together, as the eye does with form, for example. This contact easily creates problems that are very difficult to get rid of. So Ajaan Khao taught that those who are ordained to practice Dhamma to free themselves from all dukkha should always be very careful whenever any pair of these ayatana, or all of them together, go inward and make contact with the heart. They should not allow the internal ayatana, such as the eyes, to make contact with the corresponding external ayatana, such as form, without having mindfulness constantly in their hearts. Those who set up their minds to be restrained and watchful in accordance with the teaching of the Lord Buddha are those who train themselves for the steady process of washing out the kilesas. They are not slow and hesitant in walking the path, so they will reach the shore of safety before long. But for all of those who practice the way without going through to the end, they will generally tend to remain submerged, groping about in dukkha. They simply let a giant demon gobble them up along the way while they are still practicing the way of Dhamma, because they don't have any restraint or any interest in being careful. Although they have little mindfulness and wisdom, they want to see results before doing the work, so they venture out into the demon's territory, the field of the countless emotional problems which are a danger to them. First they lose restraint, then carefulness and mindfulness disappear in the jungle, leaving such people to fight the tiger with their bare hands. Finally, they climb up onto the chopping block and let the kilesas of raga tanha, sexual craving, chop them up and make a delicious meal out of them. The only thing that stands out prominently is their own incompetence. For this reason, restraint in the 6 sense faculties, indriya, is an essential task for those who are ordained and who practice the way. Those who have already done some of this practice will know about it for themselves, without there being any need to tell them. No other task is as arduous as this one. But if it is hard, so be it. If it is difficult, so be it. Setting up an attitude of restraint and carefulness in one's heart is bound to be a major task in all situations. It means fighting in order to extract the kilesas, which are like arrows stuck in the heart. It means battling the strength of the kilesas which are pouring into the 6 internal sense fields, as well as cleaning out and uprooting those kilesas that dwell in the heart, which are continually creating trouble and restlessness there. No other task is more arduous than destroying and cleaning out the kilesas. There is nothing more difficult than the task of extracting those kilesas that fuel the fire which burns and smolders in the heart all the time. The Lord Buddha, the foremost of all wise men, placed this task at the highest level of importance and value. Whoever learns this task to completion is supreme in a way that requires no confirmation from anyone else, for the supremacy of his virtue exists on its own as a natural principle of Dhamma, which he knows for himself by way of Sandirtiko, having no doubt what it is. The task of restraining these sense faculties could, at the time of the Lord Buddha, arouse a sense of competition. This is because anyone who guards even one of the fields of sensation finds it difficult. It is as if they don't have any other fields of sense, so it seems to them as if guarding any of the other fields of sense could not be as difficult as the one they are guarding. For example, the Pancha Bhikkhu, the 5 bhikkhus who each guarded one of his fields of sense. The first guarded only his eyes whenever they came into association with any visible form. The next guarded only his ears whenever they heard any sound. The next guarded only his nose whenever he smelt anything. The next guarded only his tongue whenever he tasted anything. The last one guarded only his body whenever anything cold or hot, soft or hard, made contact with it. None of them guarded all the fields of sense. When they got together to discuss their experiences, each of them boasted that the field of sense that he was guarding was more difficult to guard than any of the others. This led to arguments and disagreements, because none of them were ready to concede that the others could find it as difficult to do as they themselves did, and none of them would accept that all the fields of sense were equally difficult to guard. In the end, the Lord Buddha came and expounded the Dhamma to them, teaching them that each of the fields of sense was equally difficult to guard, saying, "The eye likes to see beautiful and attractive forms. The ear likes to hear sounds that are beautiful, melodious, and pleasing to the heart. The nose likes to smell things that are pleasantly scented, making one feel joyful. The tongue likes to taste things that are delicious, and the body likes to touch and feel things that are soft and smooth, which produces a state of absorbed fascination all the time without ever having too much of it. All of this originates from the heart, which is the overlord of all these fields of sense. The heart is the one that wants to play about with them all the time, without being the least bit concerned to consider what is right or wrong, what is good or bad. All the heart wants is what fulfills its desires. This makes all the fields of sense, including the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, whirl about according to the emotional dictates of the heart. The emotional dictates of the kilesas force the heart to struggle. When guarding each sense field, we must keep a guard on the heart at the same time. The heart is the ringleader, which constantly creates the desire to see sights, to hear sounds, to smell scents, to taste foods, and to feel contacts. The heart is the one that desires, that craves, that is hungry and thirsty, the one that goes searching for sensations. So the heart uses its instruments, which are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, as the paths by which it travels out to search for all sorts of aramana. So you must guard the heart with mindfulness and investigate it carefully with wisdom. Don't let it roam about getting involved in things which are dangerous. Use mindfulness to control the heart. Use wisdom to investigate and examine the aramana that arise from making contact with forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and things which contact the body, so as to learn the truth of such things. Then the heart will remain detached and indifferent. It will not love some things and hate others, and so become angry. It will then easily enter into a state of calm and peacefulness, without being burdened or troubled by external matters. When the citta is replete and satisfied in that calm state, it will withdraw from it and examine the internal sense fields of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body as being merely instruments of the heart. It will then examine those arammana in relation to the heart, seeing that they both become intimately blended together as though they were one and the same thing. The examination of the physical body may be done in whatever way you find most suitable, either by examining its repulsiveness, asubha, or by seeing its impermanence, anicca, its unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, or its lack of any self, anatta, or by dividing it up into the elements, dhatu, or groups, khanthas, whichever one finds most suitable and easiest to do. The examination of the body is important because initially the arammana of the heart tends to be bound up with external things such as visible forms. So you must analyze this relationship, going back and forth to see how it works until you understand all about arammana. You will see that they are things which infiltrate the heart, and so are not one and the same thing as the heart. Go on investigating until you gain an understanding of how the external and internal sense fields work, using mindfulness, wisdom, faith, and effort relentlessly without weakening. When you have completely examined all aspects of it, whatever is false will drop away from the heart, and whatever is true will be a trusted companion of the heart that supports it and enables it to do its work with ease and skill right through to the end of the road, so that nothing will be able to obstruct it any more. When the Lord Buddha finished giving this teaching about guarding the sense fields, all 5 of those bhikkhus attained the level of arahantship directly from the great teacher. They finished the task and no longer needed to act like convicts in prison, watchfully guarding their sense faculties all the time. All quarrels and arguments between them also stopped at the same time. Thus it is that the sense faculties in association with the 6 sense fields are things which are always very difficult to guard. In fact, nothing can compare with it, because these are the avenues by which all the most powerful kilesas push their influence and get their own way. If you don't have mindfulness to thoroughly look after yourself, and wisdom to skillfully sort out what is happening when the kilesas pour out through one of these pathways, you are bound to fall flat on your back every time. Nobody can rightly boast that they have gained the exceptional ability needed to attain Buddha purity by letting go of all bodily restraint and letting the mind go where it will. For that reason, the 4 moral purities, parisuddhi sila, are essential dhammas that are very important among Buddhists, especially amongst those who practice the way. I myself don't dare to act so boldly with the kilesas, for I lack these dhammas as weapons to fight with them. Without these dhammas, no amount of bravery can defeat them. Those who have freed themselves from the kilesas are the most persistent and resolute of warriors, who have reached the goal of the religious life, brahmacharya, by using these dhammas. In doing so, they have become the most exalted of individuals, whom the world bows down and pays homage to as the highest examples of spiritual attainment. Bhattimukha Sangvara Sila. This moral purity involves being self-controlled and guarded with respect to the moral behavior expressed in the Bhattimukha. It means not transgressing or resisting any of the rules, whether minor or major. This ensures that the manners and the behavior of those who are ordained shall be good and seemly. There are 227 rules in the Bhattimukha, but there are also a large number of minor rules that the Buddha established from time to time that appear outside the Bhattimukha. In fact, those rules in the Bhattimukha are a small proportion of the total number of rules, which altogether number in the thousands. Those who are good pupils, following in the footsteps of the teacher, which means the great teacher, will have a reverent attitude to the moral precepts which are to be found in the Vinaya, for the Vinaya stands in the place of the great teacher. Ajiva parisuddhi sila. This moral purity entails the livelihood of a bhikkhu who is a follower of the Tathagata, the Buddha. For example, a bhikkhu walks on the alms round, going on foot to the village each day to receive his food. He does not use tricks, fraud, or deception to get his food. A bhikkhu also obtains all of his 4 basic requisites in a pure way, meaning that the one who gives does so with a pure heart, knowing that the one who receives has come looking for it in a pure manner, not with some ulterior motive as is done in the world at large. He searches for it in the manner of a bhikkhu, partakes of it in the manner of a bhikkhu, lives in the manner of a bhikkhu, and uses the 4 requisites in the manner of a bhikkhu, fully and completely, without extravagance, pride, vanity, intemperance, or arrogance. He dwells in the Dhamma of contentment, which is the basic level of living and progressing of a bhikkhu who has the sila of pure livelihood as the ornament that decorates his status. Whether he is in want or he has plenty, he is seemly in his status and never goes beyond the bounds of what is proper for a bhikkhu. It is this Dhamma of right livelihood which adorns the mouth, the stomach, and the status of a bhikkhu, making his behavior always pleasing and attractive. Paccaya-sannissita sila. This moral purity means that a bhikkhu must be self-controlled and restrained in respect of the 4 requisites which he depends on. He must not be capricious or whimsical in his choice of food, or any of the other requisites, which opens the way for other baneful blemishes to flow in. The requisites that a recluse depends on are of 4 kinds. 1. The robes which he wears in his status as a bhikkhu. They should be the right size for him and dyed with a yellowish-brown color which the Lord called gasawa, the yellow robe. A bhikkhu must always have 3 robes without fail. They are the jivara, the main robe, the sankarti, the outer robe, and the antaravasaka, the lower robe. Apart from these, there are various other auxiliary pieces of cloth such as the angsa, a kind of undershirt, the bathing cloth, and various other pieces used for certain necessities. 2. Pindapata is the category concerned with food. This means basic foods that people everywhere rely upon for sustenance to keep them going from day to day. It includes all those foods that a bhikkhu is allowed to eat according to the Vinaya rules. 3. Bhikkhus must depend upon a dwelling place, sayanasana, much as people in the world do. It is the place where they live, lie down to rest and sleep, and practice the way of samana dhamma in all activities. That place should suit the temperament of someone who is not restless and agitated, such as living at the foot of a tree, at the mouth of a cave, under an overhanging cliff, in a forest, on a mountainside, on a mountain ridge, at the foot of a mountain, in a charnel ground, or in a small hut in the thick jungle. Any place which is sufficient to give some cover to rest, sleep, and practice Dhamma by day and night. These are what are meant by a dwelling place. In other words, it is a suitable place to live for a bhikkhu whose purpose in ordaining is to practice meditation for the sake of Dhamma, for the path, fruition, and nibbana, and for gaining true freedom. For a bhikkhu who has these purposes in mind, the above dwelling places will provide a suitable place to live and practice well. If we were to hold a competition among various kinds of dwelling places, making the Lord Buddha the judge instead of the Kilesas, dwellings would surely be rated according to the principles of Dhamma, not according to how expensive, opulent, well-built, and lasting they are. Beautiful and expensive dwellings with many floors, many rooms, and many passageways would not get high marks. For the dwelling places which were favorably rated in the time of the Lord Buddha were those listed above. Beginning with the Lord Buddha and continuing through all the Sāvakas, there has never been any disagreement on this issue, which has been displayed in the Dhamma teachings for all to see. All subsequent generations have read these teachings, studied them, and put them into practice, following on from teacher to pupil, right up to the present day. In most cases, the refuges, sarana, that Buddhists gain within themselves arise from those dwelling places that are replete with qualities that promote only Dhamma, like the ones described above. Such places are suitable for the life and daily practice of someone who truly sees the danger in the round of samsara within his heart. Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha are likely to arise in those places, for they can arise more easily there than in places that cause restlessness and agitation. Disturbing, restless places are almost certain to be fertile ground for the cultivation and promotion of the Kilesas, for the development of the round of Gamma and the round of Vipaka, the results of Gamma, which like a wheel spins round and round in a circle with no apparent way out, like a red ant circling around the outer edge of a winnowing basket. To summarize, the dwelling places which the Lord Buddha recommended, of which dwelling at the foot of a tree is an example, are places that are fully appropriate to the present day. They support and encourage one's efforts to drive out the kilesas by pushing them into a corner, destroying them, and quickly dispersing them from the heart. Therefore, when a man is being newly ordained as a bhikkhu, his preceptor is required to teach him which dwelling places are suitable for the life of a monk. This has always been the case with every bhikkhu who is ordained, from the time of the Buddha to the present day. Never in that time has dwelling at the foot of a tree been considered out of date, except perhaps in cases where bhikkhus are overwhelmed by the kilesas, which drag them along and force them to consider it old-fashioned. So there has never been any objection to the well-taught Dhamma, Swakata Dhamma, by those who aim to know and see Dhamma in the heart by means of the practice of Citta Bhavana, following the path of the great teacher and what he taught. For the practice that he taught tends to blend in well with their preference for dwelling at the foot of a tree, in a cave, under an overhanging cliff, in a charnel ground, or in thick forest. These places are suitable because they encourage the putting forward of effort more so than any other type of place. This includes those costly places which worldly people consider good, such as city centers and shopping malls. This is because Dhamma and those who search for Dhamma are different from most people in the world, even though they may come from the same social background, because their thinking and their understanding are quite different. Therefore, the places that are favored by followers of Dhamma, such as those mentioned above, are places that are always suitable for the steady and continuous practice of Dhamma. They are not old-fashioned or out of date. Rather, they are battlefields of victory where people can constantly do battle with the various kinds of kilesas until the sky and the earth disintegrate and until faith in the sasana Dhamma disappears completely from people's hearts. 4. Yelana Pesajja means medicines which people throughout the world normally use for curing sickness. The nature of a bhikkhu's body is similar to that of people everywhere. They both have the same requirements so far as food and medicines are concerned. At the time of the Lord Buddha, however, they had few medicines, unlike nowadays when we have many. Even the diseases probably weren't as strange and unusual as the ones people have nowadays, since they arose mostly due to natural causes found in their immediate environment. So in the early teachings of Buddhism, the only medicines recommended for bhikkhus were pickled urine and a few herbal remedies. There were not many medicines then, like nowadays when they have become goods which flood the market. Today the population is very high, so there are many diseases, many doctors, many medicines, and many people who die of diseases that the medicines and the doctors cannot cure. In past ages there was a low population. People had little and there was less disease, so there were few medicines, and deaths due to unusual and strange diseases were rare. Because of that, people were not concerned about medicines and doctors like they are nowadays. According to the ancient Buddhist scriptures, bhikkhus at the time of the Lord Buddha showed little concern or anxiety for dangerous diseases and painful fevers. There is no indication that they took medicines along with them when they traveled. The most that they took along, if they took anything at all, was yellow myrobalan and emblic myrobalan to cure the feelings of physical weakness and tiredness that occasionally arose. But they always considered the path, fruition, and nibbana to be the surest remedy of all. Their minds were more likely to go in the direction of Dhamma in order to transcend the world, rather than succumbing to the fear of dangerous diseases, painful fevers, and death, and then searching for medicines to cure them. They had little fear of death, but they had great fear of being unable to get free from the kilesas and the great mass of dukkha. Day and night, in all their activities, the bhikkhus of that day were fully engaged in the practice of Dhamma. Their faith, their effort, their mindfulness, their samadhi, and their wisdom were all fully engaged in the practice of Dhamma. Then, if a dangerous and painful fever arose in them, those bhikkhus would be most likely to examine it in the light of Dhamma, which, in effect, turns into a medicine that both cures the fever and destroys the kilesas at the same time. They did not weakly depend on medicines and doctors as their main life support. They used them only as was reasonably appropriate for a bhikkhu who has faith in Dhamma, faith in Kamma, and faith in the Dhamma truths as being always true and unchanging. Under normal conditions, those bhikkhus were calm and pleasing to look at. When they had a painful illness, they did not suddenly lose their composure and start writhing about in pain uncontrollably, discarding that exemplary behavior that is seemly and appropriate for a recluse. Instead, they had mindfulness as their companion, so they were not heavy-hearted or depressed. They never forgot the Dhamma they had in their hearts. Even today, Thutanga Kammatthana bhikkhus practice in the same way as those bhikkhus at the time of the Lord Buddha when they are afflicted with painful ailments. They are less concerned about their sickness and whether it will be cured or not, or whether they will live or die, than they are about their investigation into the Dhamma truths. They are more interested in understanding the true nature of the body, the painful feeling, memory, sanya, and imaginative thought, sankhara, which deceive the chitta at that time. By this understanding, they destroy the kilesas at the same time. In doing so, they entrust their health and well-being to those Dhamma truths that appear in connection with the illness and the pain at that time. At the same time, they consider the deceptive tricks of their minds which have been instigated by kilesas to be very important. In the investigation, mindfulness and wisdom must take note of those deceptive tricks, and also maintain contact with the pain, with the body, and with the heart, all of which are interrelated. The purpose of the investigation is to use wisdom to know and understand clearly the true nature of all these factors in order to gradually let go of attachment to them as mindfulness and wisdom discover the truth. Bhikkhus do use medicines to cure sickness, but they prefer to use the Dhamma remedy, which is the one that attacks and destroys the kilesas at the same time. They do not merely lie down, keeping a watch over their pain as they wait for medicines to cure them, or weakly call out for people to help them recover. Instead, they call on faith, effort, mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom to help cure their sickness and help destroy the kilesas at the same time. The result is the realization that sickness is merely something which arises in the body and not something which should be allowed to pierce and enter their hearts. So their hearts remain strong in their faith in the Dhamma truths, which they see clearly in themselves. Mindfulness and wisdom are then fully proficient within them, and they are not afraid of suffering or death. So they are contented and free from anxiety and concern. This is what is meant when we say that present-day Thutanga Kammatthana bhikkhus treat illness with the Dhamma remedy, which is the way it's usually done in the sphere of the Dhamma truths.